I'd like to invite Ats from ICT, President of ICT, and the panel that will be joining him on this stage. Is he there? Please, Sandra, Sarav, please come on board. Lassina Kone, Justina, Samir. Okay, so and Ats will do the introduction. But as Ats is sitting, maybe a question for you. You're the president of ICT cluster or ITR. For you to manage 150 companies of the most intelligent people in Estonia, how do you manage this? Just tell me the truth.
Really?
Yeah.
First of all, good morning. They're a really intelligent group of people, so there's nothing difficult to manage. It's just creating the environment to collaborate.
Okay.
And I hope we can discuss that in length today as well.
Please, go ahead.
So, first of all, a brief introduction of who's here. So, thank you to all the panelists that you have joined me and joined this wonderful event. My name is Ats Albre. I'm the president of ICT, IT Companies Association in Estonia, and in parallel, I'm also from private sector working as CEO of Nortel Estonia, which is one of the leading companies who has digitalized Estonia and has been doing that in Africa for more than 10 years as well. For example, in Botswana, in finance, billions with a B saved. But today, I would focus more on the panelists, your ideas in talking about what actually happens after connectivity. We just heard from the ministers panel, for example, Nigeria investing 2 billion in building up infrastructure, connectivity, to build up the digital ecosystem and the economy. But what is possible? How to get there? What is a digital society? And this is something to strive for. I, for one, absolutely believe it is. But today, with me, we have Sandra Särav, who is the Deputy Secretary General for Economy and Innovation from Estonia, absolute digital policy expert, also for a time worked in private sector in Bolt, the well-known unicorn, I believe, in Africa as well. And a great example of how people in Estonia move between public sector and private sector, and also a person who makes government officials' work from the outside really attractive. She comes with such a passion that a lot of people see that government is where we would like to work at. So thank you for joining the panel.
And before I introduce next people, a colleague asked that you haven't heard the word of Estonian spoken yet in this room. So now everyone has said good morning, so I have to say tere, and now you have to say tere back. On 3, 1, 2, 3, tere.
Tere.
Perfect.
And it means something naughty, actually. No, it's hello. Thank you. So next we have Lassina Kone, Director General and Chief Executive Officer of Smart Africa, a really well-known personality in Africa, one of the leading people in Africa's digital transformation. You have been leading Smart Africa, I believe, from 2019 already, and overseen a lot of important projects like digital identity, the startup ecosystem, innovative ecosystem in Africa, to name a few. So amazing that you're here with us. Justina Oha, founder of Digital Equity Africa. You have been trying to change Africa through ecosystem building and inclusion in terms of gender and digital. For example, former country director at the UK Nigeria Tech Hub, where she brokered a partnership with Google for startups in Africa to support women in technology and female founders. So we heard from Daniel previously that this group of people is really diverse in that regard. So we hope to hear more from you, from your consulting experience, from how you bring and help access to African markets, the companies here. So thank you for joining us. And finally, Samir Abdelkrim from France, founder of Emerging Valley, French entrepreneur, consultant, author, a lot of roles, I understand. And one of the things he is well known for is that you wrote a book a while back regarding Africa and African startups. It's called Startups Lions. And through that, you gained really extensive experience of the continent's digital ecosystem that you would like to share with us, and what you have been doing afterwards in building up bridges between Europe and Africa. So thank you for joining. So first of all, kicking the conversation off, the path to digital societies and how the societies can actually benefit people and the economy. I would first of all ask Lassina, could you, as a context for all of us, briefly describe the as-is situation and the road towards digital society, and what are the biggest challenges, opportunities you see at the moment, and the ultimate goal and ambition level as well?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to these sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you, Estonia, and to my brother from another mother, Daniel. In terms of digitalizations, digital transformations, and the roads and beyond connectivity, we have really 4 pillars we talk about: connect, innovate, transform, accelerate. By looking at that, we need to be aware of something. Potential has never been an index for development for any country. Africa has a lot of potential, but doesn't mean anything if we don't do anything about it. And we have to realize also that talking about digital transformation, the most important thing that it needs is the leadership. The leadership is very important because we are navigating in a very disruptive world where the common denominator for every single thing in digital communication and digital transformation is agility. But when you say agility, it goes against exactly what the mindset of most of the governments in Africa is, because we used to, not only until now, regulation to regulate. In my perspective, 36,000 feet, when I look at the continent, the differentiation factor between one country to another country is the agility in terms of adaptations. It's like you are on the plane and the flight plan keep on changing. I'll give you a typical example. When the head of the state comes to power, they're there for 4 or 5 years. But digital transformation plan goes beyond that. So what do you focus on? So the flight plan keep on changing, but you have to make sure. At the same time, another element driving all of these is the innovation. Regulation has to be an enabler for innovation. But typically when you look at the way we are all cut right back from the time we had independence, regulation means I need to supervise, I need to surveillance, and I need to tax. No, it does not work in technology. We're living in a disruptive world where everything around us will change. The only thing that will remain constant is the world change itself. You see how difficult that leadership is? Also, when we look at digital transformation today, we see agriculture, health, transportation, education, so on and so forth. The digital transformation is transversal. So how do you get an agreement around all of this? So leadership at the state level and leadership also at the minister's level is very important. And the way you can diagnose this in any country, you have to look at the protocol hierarchy of a digital communication or ICT minister. He has to be given a lot of power. Because in order to transform each sector, look at Estonia. Estonia, 1.3 million. I came to realize every single sector department have their own ICT, and they all aggregate all this information through a next road, right? Based on the digital ID. First of all, on our continent, we are striving to advocate that digital ID does not mean control over election. It's your identity. So if we are going to use the technology for socio-economic development, then it has to be human-centric. So these are some of the challenges. This is actually 36,000 view where I see it. Look at a country like Nigeria, like the minister was saying. 50 million people on the banking sector, close to 100 million or 90 million people on the digital ID. Do you realize the power of this in terms of digital data economy? If all of these have a next road or data sharing platform where the government can actually interchange information, I'll just stop there. I'm not going to monopolize the conversation. So next time.
But maybe just a follow-up question then. The potential is huge. So
Yes.
what do you think about the ambition level, where to set the ambition?
The ambition of Africa
Yeah.
is huge. Africa for us, in terms of technology, it is the place to be. It is the leading. It will lead the world for a simple reason. It's mathematics. All what we see today being manifested in a big tech firm in America. America, of course, you know, I don't need to repeat this. I say it all the time. They control 70% of the digital economy. China controls 22%. Europe controls 3.4%. Africa 1.5%. All of these majority is only B2C, which is private sector to customer. If we approach a digital transformation of human-centric in Africa, then you need to ask yourself a fundamental question: how many services a citizen will need from a government? An average of 5-7. How many transactions per day? Each country, we are 1.4 billion population. So what we're seeing in terms of digital economy led by big tech firm is only the tip of the iceberg. So Africa still remains untapped. That's the reason when we talk about ambition, our governments are very ambitious. We see Nigeria, we see it happening in Kenya. My sister was here talking about it. We see it in South Africa, we see it in Rwanda, we see it in Morocco, we see it in Egypt. The potential is actually huge. And you know what? We do have the ingredient for it. You know what's the ingredient? It's a demographic dividend, which is a 70% less than 30 years old. So we are in the game for a long time.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Quick additional comment and back to panelists. One area where I feel it's really relatable is that although Estonia has at some point digitalized really well the whole government, now what is happening is that young people who are growing up, they have no idea why you should ever go to a government office, and the interaction between the government and the person has changed because there's no need, everything is digital. So the amount of youth and potential is just amazing in Africa. But maybe from that topic, since connectivity and inclusion were mentioned already, so Justina, if you would, with your words, also describe the potential of including a lot more people in Africa, and also elaborate on the connectivity part, that what's still missing.
Thank you very much for that question. Going back to what you said, growing up, if you have to deal with the government, you're in trouble. So it's nice that platforms are now digitized and, you know, they're no longer personal touch. Going to your question, you know, in order for society to be truly digital, everybody, regardless of their social status, should be included in the conversation. And then in order for this to happen, policy, first of all, needs to be right. Like Nasina rightly said, leadership is everything. And within the context here, I'm talking about government policies. If the policies in place do not include everyone, they will be excluded. And policy is often sometimes harvested from one region to another, but we have to think about the local application of the policy and what it means, you know, within the context of our own reality as a people. So I would say, first of all, policy needs to be right, because money will move in the direction of policy. Partnerships will move in the direction of policy.
Yes.
Collaboration will move in the direction of policy. Second to that is infrastructure. You know, Boston has walked away, my minister. Recently we signed, he announced an SPV to increase fiber optic connectivity in Nigeria by over 90,000 kilometers, which I think is really amazing. If there is no opportunity to connect, you know, you're excluded automatically. But in saying all of this, there is also what, you know, digital literacy and the role that it plays, because If the policies are in place and there is connectivity, but there is no basically digital literacy, then again, you're not part of the digital economy. You're once again excluded. And so part of the work that we're doing at Digital Equity Africa is to work with everyone where they are on the spectrum. On this broad spectrum, there are people like me who has foreign education. There's also the farmer up north in Nigeria who has a feature phone and doesn't even have internet connection. And so we do work like, partnering with telecommunication providers to reach them digitally through USSDs without, internet. You're a farmer, you want to go out to farm, you can dial a code and find out the weather forecast, right, without leaving your home, without being connected to the wide web. So we're really innovating in the way that we're bringing people in, because you can't get them from A to Z without first meeting them where they are, and then you graduate them along the spectrum. There is also a lot of advocacy work that goes into product builders. The products that are in the market need to mirror the market. Essentially, there has to be something for everyone. If you're building exclusively and not including, that limits the way that the transformation will happen, right? And recall that when people get into the funnel, they graduate from top to middle to bottom. I have seen people transform in that way. I mean, personally, my first degree was in communication, and then I went on to get a master's in diplomacy. How did I end up here? I married a tech guy, right? And today I'm a digital expert. Yeah, so there is potential for people to be met where they are and to be handheld, and they become really embedded into the digital society, because the potential is really limitless. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra, hearing all of this, and also previously what the ministers were discussing in their panel, how do you see, compared to Estonia, what are the challenges and opportunities that are similar currently in Estonia and the whole African continent, which is a bit bigger, I understand.
Bigger, yes. Well, Lassina already chose a lot of the words that I wanted to choose, but you spoke like a poet, so I have nothing to add. A lot of the similarities come from the post-connectivity world that we are discussing as this panel. Cybersecurity or security in general. Your entire continent is connected. We've been to a few countries, only a few countries, not as many as Daniel, in Africa, and it's amazing how fast connection you have, how cheap it is, how accessible it is. But then we have to think of the next step. When we use government services, when we use private sector services, how secure are the services that we are using? In Estonia, Estonia was one of the first countries, or the first country in the world, in 2007, against whom there was a nationwide cyber attack launched. Luckily, we had been proving our systems. There were no data leaks, the systems were down. However, now the world started to believe in Estonia when we said cybersecurity was important. And as our minister started this day with, he said even the NATO cybersecurity center of excellence is in Estonia. So definitely in a post-connected world, we have to think about security. And this is the similar issue we still face, whether it's for geopolitical reasons for Estonia, but in general, guys and girls who just want to, they can hack whatever system they want to. So definitely security is one of the issues. And second was mentioned really as well is the digital literacy and including everyone in this process. So in my team, we have just adopted a new legislation or passed a new legislation regarding making all the invoices in Estonia digital. And then we figured out there are still 7% of the population who don't use internet on a daily basis. So some people still want their invoices to their inbox when they pay for their telecommunication services or whatnot. So we still have to figure out this part. And you said really well that young people demand more, and I think this is what is going to thrive, what is going to make us thrive. However, at the same time, we cannot forget about the elderly who might also want to be connected. And here I give the story of my grandmother, who now unfortunately has passed, but she was online and she used all of the services. And when I lived in another country, I had to send her pictures of myself, and then she would send me pictures of herself and grandfather. via Viber. And then at one point she said, "Dear child, you don't need to send me pictures anymore. I'm on Instagram now." And I think this is what we need to strive for, that all of the services are as simple and easy to use as social media. I mean, if you look at how many people worldwide use social media, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Facebook services, no single government has as many people to serve as the global social media platforms, and they have made their services really simple. And this is a challenge and struggle for everyone, whether it's Estonia, whether it's African countries, whether it's any other country. The services that we offer need to be proactive, need to be seamless, need to be easy to use. No service should take longer than a few minutes in interaction with the government, and especially this is going to be the case with the youngsters, who are going to demand quality over quantity of interaction with the governments.
Thank you. So cybersecurity, ease of access, usability, inclusion, a lot of words already mentioned that are really similar from a really high satellite view comparing Africa and Estonian challenges. Samir, you as having a really deep understanding of the whole digital ecosystem in Africa, and now building up, let's say, bridges between Europe and Africa. What are the key benefits and challenges of co-innovation between European and African tech ecosystems, and how can we bridge the digital divide between Europe and Africa better?
Thank you. Do you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, Daniel, for the invitation. I feel a bit home here in Estonia since in the Baltic region, since I lived 1 year and a half of my previously in Lithuania. It's next to Estonia as an Erasmus student. I'm very happy every time I come back to the Baltic region. One of the things I would like to share, a few weeks ago, I was at the Friends of Europe seminar, and I was at the Africa-Europe Cooperation Roundtable, and I took the example of Estonia as an example of diplomatic soft power of collaboration between Africa, the African continent, and the European continent, thanks to digital. I'm French, originally from Algeria, and in Estonia is a good example of how Africa and Europe can collaborate concretely and moving forward. And a lot of, when I was a student in Lithuania, Western Europe was not taking very seriously what was going on in Baltic region. But I think we should, in Western Europe, learn from what Estonia is doing. And thank you, Daniel, for gathering us, because you are an example of this diplomatic soft power. Thank you very much. I think that what we try to do in Marseille, but maybe I will take a talk about it later. But what we want to do concretely is how we have challenges in sort of France and in Southern Europe, and how we can work with African startups to startups, incubators to incubators. And probably I will give more details about the Emerging Valley. But we take the sectors we work on, and Marseille, Aix-Marseille Provence, who last year was labeled European Capital of Innovation, and I think we have also a lot of links to develop with Estonia. We have launched a program to attract African startups to work together with Marseille startups in healthcare, in clean tech, and in also logistics. Why? Because right now Marseille is experiencing, in terms of climate change, will experience in 20 years in terms of climate change what North Africa is already experiencing. So there is a lot of challenges that African innovation is already solving. that we can learn now. I will give you also one anecdote. 10 years ago, I was participating in the first edition of Transform Africa. Transform Africa in Kigali, and I was in the office of the minister, ICT minister at that time, Jean-Philbert Nsengimana. I was tech reporter for Le Monde. And they launched Irembo. I don't know who knows the Irembo portal. It was launched 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was the first African portal to digitize public services. And we talk about what Europe is doing in terms of digitizing administration. But Rwanda, 10 years ago, started it, and it's a huge success. It's digitized 100 public services, from birth certificate to driving license to marriage certificate and visa and extra 100. The benefits are cutting corruption. This is the main, one of the main advantages is cutting corruption, because you pay online and you get rid of the cash. Lassina knows it by heart, but this is one inspiration that actually I would be happy to have Irembo in France, because when I, as a French taxpayer, when I deal with the administration in France, I would be very, very happy to, if I could have, if France could have implemented Irembo for the French administration. So, and also, I voluntarily quote Rwanda as an example of inspiration for Europe-African solution and co-innovation. At that time, also the minister told me about the Zipline project. Zipline, I don't know if you heard about Zipline, is a drone that is delivering medical aid, healthcare to remote areas in Rwanda. At that time, it was in 2015, I was a reporter for Le Monde at that time. It was not taken seriously back in Europe, because they said, okay, it's a nice experimental project, but this is science fiction. Now, Zipline is, and this technology of drone delivering medical aid to remote areas in Rwanda is also a huge success. And it has inspired even my hometown. Next to Marseille, you have Aix-en-Provence, small town in Provence. And they are starting to experiment in 2024 the technology of delivering drone to remote areas in Provence. So again, 10 years ahead, almost 10 years ahead. So I think that the collaborating, and you mentioned the question of visa, collaborating between Europe and Africa is not an option, is not a fashion, it's compulsory. If we want to, if Europe wants to be stronger, because the climate change, because the question of scarcity of resource, Africa is bringing the solution. And just to conclude, one thing that Europe must do to, and I know as with Emerging Valley, because we bring every year 100 startups, African startups in Provence, is the question of visa for entrepreneurs. We must facilitate the obtention of visa for African entrepreneurs, because it's a barrier, and we must co-create so much wealth and so much value if we could have this ease of access to visa for African entrepreneurs and talent and investors.
Thank you, Samir. You already started to talk about specific examples, what has worked really well, and how others can really learn from Africa and different African countries and startups. So, Lassina, I would continue on that topic. So maybe if you zoom out a bit, but also give some practical examples of what is happening, what are the cornerstones that really help to get to this digital society, bigger digital economy, but practical things that you see are really having a big impact already and in the upcoming, let's 5 years.
Thank you for the questions. I always speak beyond the connectivity. I always tell people connectivity is not the issue. I've been on several panels with the MNOs, which is a mobile network operator. This is the coverage we need to cover. Anyone who tells you connectivity is in Africa today is the real challenge. It is not the challenge. You know why? Because if you look at Africa as a continent, we have, according to ITU, we have 46% of people connected, 54% unconnected. But on a mobile broadband, we have 60% usage gap. You know what does that mean? It means area covered with connectivity, people are not using it. And if you look at the coverage gap, combined mobile and the FTTH and the fiber, combined, the usage gap combined mobile plus fixed is about 30%, and you have another 30% coverage gap, which means area where there is no connectivity. If Africa is able to focus to gaining the usage gap, the combined is 30%, but the mobile sector only is about 60% by working on 4 things. Affordability of the internet, smart devices, local content, cyber hygiene. We can be racking around 75 to 80% from now to 2025. So what will be the use? What's the benefit of continuing coverage while the usage gap you're widening? So the connectivity is not really an issue. Let's focus on innovation and transformation when I look at the next 5 years. When I said we are on the flight, and the plane and the flight plan is being changed every time, it is how do we focus on this demographic dividend, the young people who are actually sitting here in the room. Innovations, regulations for development, or regulation should be an enabler. In fact, one of the things Samir was saying, the difference you see between African country and digital transformation is nothing else. Regulation can make or break a country. The difference between Nigeria and UAE is the regulation. It's not the oil issue. The difference between Singapore and Liberia is the regulation. How do you create a conducive environment for your country for people to come in and invest? Nothing else. There's no magic bullet. So what we're seeing, if we're able to focus on innovation, we're creating a conducive environment for our young people to flourish. Create a bridge between Europe and Africa in terms of startup collaborations. And we create, we make funds available for, because today what is happening to our startup? We have 7 unicorns, something like this. But let me tell you, I'll be very bold. No gloves on. 7 unicorn, African unicorn. Are they registered in Africa? No. They're registered in Delaware, or they're registered in Singapore, or they're registered in Canada. That's where the value is. The market is in Africa, but they're not registered in Africa. Are they African unicorn? Estonia, 1.3 million, have 11 unicorn. 10 now, right? 10 unicorn. All these Skype were created here, both were created here. Do we have something like this? No. So it's time for our government to take seriously and trust our young people to deliver. Because you know why? The mistake we've all been making is to think that Mark Zuckerberg will come down to Africa and develop a context, application or context. It's not going to happen. Do you want me to give you an example? Apple Pay. You all know Apple Pay? It's been around for about 6, 7 years. Why they're not in Africa? Because they don't trust our market. But if we don't trust ourselves, who's going to trust us? And to trust ourselves, we need to build the trust. In Europe, in the West, or global North, I don't like to use that term, they use in a trust economy. In Africa, we live in a truth economy. I think I mentioned that before. The trust economy is, if you look in your pocket, you have credit card. It's not your money, it's OPM, other people's money. You have zero balance, you go, you tap at ATM or you buy, at the end of the month you pay. In Africa, whatever card I have in my pocket, the money is a hard cash. That is a truth economy. For us to move from a truth economy to a trust economy, digital ID. Who are you? You need to know who am I need to know who you are. Then we trust each other. From the moment an African citizen will be walking on the street, he will get a question, do you trust the private sector first or government? When the citizen will tell you, I trust the government, we have reached actually a great milestone. That's where I see it.
Thank you. Amazing insights and pretty bold insights as well. Thank you for that. Sandra, I would continue on one of the topics Lassina just highlighted, but building a startup ecosystem and in a way digital economy that supports this kind of innovations and building this full ecosystem. How do you see what has worked in Estonia? How has the government stepped in? Where is the line and balance between government and private sector in building up these ecosystems?
Great question. It's hard to speak after you, by the way. I need to step up my game. Yeah, you mentioned so many right things. Yes, Estonia has 10 unicorns, which is the second most per capita in the world. You can open up a company in 15 minutes and 33 seconds in Estonia, which is a world record, by the way. So I think as governments, what we can do and what we should do is build the best possible environment for businesses. Yes, you can open up a company fast. You can apply for all sorts of licenses that you need online. You can apply for subsidies if available. You can finally close down the company. So what we can do as governments, you need talent. Okay, let's launch a startup visa as we have done in Estonia. You mentioned also bringing in talent or bringing Africans over here, their talent over here. What we have done in Estonia is that we're 1.3 million people, so we don't have sufficient workforce. So we launched a startup visa. We said you need some more workforce who's going to work for startup companies, etc. We're going to allow you to bring people in a manner that is faster than any other visa procedure. So, for instance, because this is what the companies asked. So it needs to be an open dialogue. Companies say we need workforce. We're going to give you workforce. They say we need less bureaucracy, we're going to give you less bureaucracy. But where's the bridge and how far we should go? I firmly believe in public-private partnership. And I think in a small country such as Estonia, especially, we cannot build everything in the public sector. I think we've even gone too far. We have too many IT workforce experts working in the public sector. We should have less. We should cooperate more with the private sector because they know what they've been doing, they know what they've been building. And if we build solutions together with the help of the private sector, we actually give them a sort of a stamp of approval so they can go and sell the similar features and similar solutions to other countries. Because another thing I firmly believe in Estonia is that if something works elsewhere, to not be afraid to copy-paste. Our ID card, you mentioned, and this is the crucial bit. A colleague calls the ID card one card to rule them all, like in the Lord of the Rings, right? So, and this was the crucial feature of Estonia. We adopted an ID card, we made it mandatory, so legislation that you also mentioned, and we actually copy-pasted the system from Finland, with the difference that we made it work. Because the Finns didn't make it mandatory, we made it mandatory. So yes, legislation, as you mentioned, works. And of course, we do it together with the private sector. Somebody mentioned X-Road earlier as well.
It means also that the democracy doesn't work every time, right?
No, I wouldn't say that. No. No. This ID card, the X-Road solutions, everything brings a lot of transparency. So hence democracy. But we need to build in some systems there to bring this transparency. But we don't have enough time to get into this. So public-private partnership in a way that the public knows what they want and the private sector comes and helps build it, and then they can go and build similar solutions elsewhere, because we are a small world after all, and if something is working somewhere, we should be adopting those solutions everywhere. Absolutely. Right? Yeah, so I guess that's my point. Public-private partnership, the public should understand that they need the help of the private sector in order to build those solutions, and other governments should learn from one another.
If I may add, in fact, no economy is well built on the public sector. You can't wake up a government worker at 3 o'clock in the morning for data center troubleshooting. No, SLA.
I have joked that you can call Sandra.
Well,
but other
maybe.
And now is the point where you put my number up on the.
Exactly. In Estonia, because you don't have a lot of workforces, but I truly believe that when the government creates a conducive environment, go on the PPP, public-private partnership, or sometime public-private people partnership, PPPP, which is the privacy by design, then the economy should be flourished, being driven by private sector.
That's true. I fully sign on to that. Justina, what about inclusion in all of that, the digital inclusion, the practical steps, how to actually get to a level where no one, like Tanya said before, that nobody is left behind, but everybody is, how was the wording? Everybody is brought along. Everybody is brought along. So what are the practical steps?
Thank you. By the way, I'm totally enjoying this panel. Fair balance of truth and power. So I love it. I would say that, the first thing that we have established that all strategies should be user-focused. We cannot strategize outside of the user. We have established policy. I want to encourage everyone here to sort of understand the spectrum, right? There's a lot of intervention that happens in silos. Most international governments are in Africa doing one digital project or the other. Local governments are on projects, state governments are on projects, nations are on projects, ministers are collaborating. But I often find that if you look at the journey, so think about talent, think about infrastructure, think about local content, and then cybersecurity. There's so much going on each of these ports. However, they are often not connected, and that's one of the problems that I see because I have been in development. You have launched a training program to improve digital skills. They have graduated after 6 months, and they do not have laptops. How do they remain contributors to the digital economy? How would they grow from learners to product builders? Those are the sort of problems that really shake the journey. Efforts are going in, but they're not aggregated. Now, part of the work we're doing at Digital Equity Africa is in accessing the market for impact, sort of looking at the journey and advising where the best implementation should be. Because you have these guys that are trained without laptops, but HP is also giving out thousands of laptops on the same continent. How might it be if HP finds the people who are graduates of digital skill programs and gives them the laptops? MTN is giving out tons of data as part of their CSR. Is it getting to the people who are already on that journey? We don't want people whose head above water only. We want them to be able to swim. Imagine a world where you've graduated, you've been given the infrastructure, internet, you've been given the hardware, and you have a little solar in your roof powering your little devices, because power is a huge enabler for infrastructure as well. And so until we begin to operate in a collective and not in silos with all of our intervention, and this is a call to every development agency here, good work, thank you for always thinking about Africa, established, but please do the work of insight and knowing where the best impact will be felt. Because what we want is to see people at the other end. Too much motion without results. And of course, all of this should happen in collaboration with government policies that are already existing. And so, for example, the Nigerian Startup Act, which went live last year, I'm part of the State Implementation Committee in my country, and we're labeling startups so they don't have to pay certain taxes and things like that. But again, if we're acting in isolation of immigration and being able to move around Africa, what use is their product if they are not paying taxes but they cannot scale within the continents, right? These are all impediments to digital penetration and inclusion, and a huge, huge part of our work at Digital Equity Africa. I feel like you want to add something.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
After you finish, yes.
Yes, that's my answer. I'm a straight shooter.
If I can jump in, just little comments on the inclusion. In fact, we are excluding in the inclusion sphere. We all talk nicely about digital economy. Who are the users? My grandmother, she doesn't speak French. She doesn't speak Flemish, he doesn't speak English, he doesn't speak Arabic. What are we going to do about those? Are we going to go and retrain my grandmother?
We can teach you to do that.
Well, teacher, well, good luck.
No, I mean,
So-
we did this in Estonia. So
Yeah,
what we
it's-
did,
yes.
we literally trained all the librarians. We taught everyone, because there are libraries in even the smallest villages of Estonia. We trained them, and we trained them to train people to use those services. We had literal IT buses going around Estonia asking people, do you know how to use your ID card? Do you know how to use services? But of course, with the language barrier, this needs to be tackled first.
Teaching them, presuming they understand any of this language. Let me be bold. Chinese did not have to learn English to be where they are. Let's be honest. The real development of the digital economy is application of digital economy in the local context. Just like what happened in M-Pesa in Kenya. We didn't have to wait for the West to teach us anything. That's one of the biggest opportunities where the AI will help Africa. How I can bring on board people who are completely excluded. Let me ask you a question. 20, 30 years ago, when we all came out with the Disability Act to access this building, I was going to the bathroom, I saw a ramp. Who asked him to do that? Because the part of the society felt excluded. Take the analogy. I can't read, I can't write, I can't speak any language, but I am a citizen of a country, I have a right for government services. Why don't we go with the reform to say any private, if it's a citizen-centric, private sector developing application, B2C, it has to use the AI in the large language model for the citizen to be able to access government service in the name of the SDG. That's how the power of the AI will be in Africa. It's not going to be used for fancy stuff, medical stuff. It's going to really bring everyone on board if we use it correctly. Minister Bosom from Nigeria was saying, in fact, top 5 most spoken African language in Africa, they aggregate to 295 million population, which is 2/3 of the market in the United States. What happened to our young people? They're responsible, the startup are responsible for these machine language learning. It's not Mark Zuckerberg, it's you. They don't know Hausa, they don't care. That is a call upon you, ALU student here in the room. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add quickly.
Please add, then I will
Yes.
ask Samir the next one.
Yes, I just wanted to add quickly that, local content is so important because it also impacts protection on the web, right? I know a woman who got a call on the phone and somebody just led her until she transferred all the money into from her account, by clicking a link. And so people need to be protected as well when they become part of the digital economy. And if you don't speak their language, your self-help video will not help. It has to be something they can relate to, or they remain exposed. And once that happens, the entire community, because Africa is a huge community, right? Once the word goes out that someone had a banking card and their account got wiped, I tell you the whole street might pull out their banking app down that same day. And so how might it be that there are help or triggers in local content that help safeguard users on the web? That is the same way that the positive ripple effect will be felt all around the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's similar to what Sandra previously covered, that after connectivity, you have the services, you have big part of the economy online, new threats arise, like you described as well. Samir, from this Europe-African startup ecosystem and building the bridge between the two, the question of practical examples to you as well, like what are the strategies that have been most effective in attracting digital African startups to Marcel, for example, and how have you been able to do it?
Thank you. I also take the opportunity to thank all the officials that came, Minister from Tanzania, and all the other ministers. Bosun, for the little anecdote, Bosun is a friend of mine. I met him 10 years ago on the roof of the CC Hub. CC Hub is the tech incubator in Yaba, now the Yabacon Valley. And he went from tech entrepreneurs to minister, and is an example that sometimes of an entrepreneur that is taking the responsibility to make change, and is a great example for all of us, and I'm very proud of Bosun. With Emerging Valley, we want to demonstrate that you can develop local solutions for global problems. For that, I worked with the authority. Last year, it was under the high patronage of President of Republic of France, Emmanuel Macron, and the local authority, the city of Marseille, the département, the métropole, the region, to make Marseille a launch pad for market expansion. I'm not talking about relocation. That's not at all. The headquarters is in Africa. You create value in Africa. But if you seek market expansion, don't go to Delaware. Stay, at least you can choose, okay, Estonia, I'm fine, but Marseille or Estonia. But don't go to Delaware for market expansion. And I want to also, of course, salute Kenya, because last year we had a very big delegation from Kenya, and from the Olympic Committee of Kenya, Paul Tagat, David Rudusha, they came to Emerging Valley. And we opened last year the House of Kenya in Miramas, next to Aix-en-Provence, because we want to collaborate closely between Marseille and Kenya, and Nairobi and Mombasa in particular, and I will be happy to pursue discussion with you. And for example, we attract startups, as I said, in the clean tech, in the health tech, in agri-tech. What we have developed is a program, the Provence Africa Connect Soft Landing Program. And the startups, they come and we accelerate them in our sectoral incubators. For example, for the logistics sector, we have the SEMA CGM, which is one of the biggest shipping company headquartered in Marseille, incubator. For the clean tech, we accelerate them in the Technopole de l'Arbois, which is one of the best clean tech incubator in Europe. It was prized last year at the CES Las Vegas. And what is interesting is that our incubators, they say, okay, you want to go global, so you are probably more interested. You want to go to the Silicon Valley, you want to go to Singapore, and they, of course, I worked a lot for that, but they all say no. It's not just about the geographical proximity, it's our common interest. Our strategic market should be Africa and the Mediterranean, because we will face the same challenges, especially, as I mentioned, in clean tech. So we have developed this program, and I don't want to monopolize the time, but we have to be concrete by example. And in my case, sensibilize the local authorities. If you can have the president, but if you don't have the local authorities with you, it will not work. And that's all I want to say, because they're just a few minutes late.
Thank you for being mindful, and thank you for also covering on the point that Lassina made, that there are other countries, other ecosystems to be part of as well, and you have shown an example through Marcel and France. So since we have last 3 minutes, I would just briefly conclude that the panel has been pretty amazing. A lot of thought-provoking ideas, which are really refreshing to hear. A lot of potential clearly there, and potential to build more on top of this networks and collaboration with Africa, with Europe, with Estonia, and with Marcel, of course. But as a last question to all of you, and let's cover that briefly. Your one wish for the upcoming 5 years on how to get to a lot better place where Africa is today and where the collaboration with Estonia is today. Just a brief comment. So maybe let's start with you, Sandra.
No pressure. Okay, my one wish. So it can be like a genie wish, so I can wish anything.
Aladdin.
Go for it.
Maybe I'd like to go back to a world without technology.
Oh.
I'm on paper today.
Yes.
One of the reasons
Sorry.
being that everything is digital,
Yes.
so I want to touch something from time to time.
Maybe each day for, I don't know, each year for a day, for a few days, we can go without technology and see how life was back then. And then we realize that we don't say digitalize for the sake of digitalizing, we digitalize for the sake of efficiency, so we can use better, faster services. And in general, technology has become an end means, but actually we should realize that technology is not an end goal, it's just a way to use services. So I wish we could go back to being without technology for a little while.
With an asterisk,
Yes.
I understand.
Yes.
Thank you. Justina.
Okay. My one wish would be that AI will come under control. AI governance is a huge issue. I didn't want to use the word problem. Potential to transform, but also to destroy. And nobody knows how far it's going. Different blogs are coming up with governance models, but how do we catch it? So I wish for a world where we would have the proliferation should remain, but the risks should be averted. AI under control. That is my wish. Thank you.
Thank you. Samir.
We talked about unicorn. My wish is that why the next unicorn will not be European or African, but would be Euro-African or Afro-European. The next unicorn. That would be a great achievement.
Amazing.
Thank you.
And lastly to you, Lassina.
Our grandfathers talked the talk. Our fathers walked the talk. We need to run the talk. If we don't run the talk, we cannot take over. To take over, we don't need to leapfrog. We have to cheat a leap. Think differently outside the box. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, it's perfect to conclude the panel. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for the audience who has traveled here from around the world. Thank you, and let's continue on making these wishes a reality.
to be honest with you, this time around has been a very fruitful, I think, trip. It's my 4th time here in Kenya, and I have experienced a good welcoming party when it comes to all the companies I met. And since I'm more familiar with the country and this culture, it was a lot more rewarding this time around.
I think it's a great trade mission. I like that it actually has broken down between the larger event, which was the summit, the B2B engagements, which have been taking place today, and then the follow-up or in-person meetings at different business premises in the remaining days. So it's, I think it's a well laid out plan.
I think it was, in many senses, a very eye-opening experience. It exposed us to various public authorities and companies in Kenya. It definitely provided us perspective in what's currently happening in the digital transformation space in Kenya, both in private and public sector. And this is the knowledge that we will be using further exploring our opportunities and building our business in Kenya.
It is our 2nd trade mission to Kenya, and we are here with Triumph Health to build resilience among children. So it's really a great pleasure and an honor to be part of the trade mission. And we have really great companies here and really great meetings and a lot of progress happening.
I think key learnings is come prepare, and this is also would be my advice to future participants. Come prepare, do your homework, understand what authorities you want to meet, understand the scope of responsibility of those authorities, and do the mapping of your service and the product offering to the objectives and the scope of responsibilities of your potential customers.
Come ready to engage, but know that it's a long-term process. It's not the first meeting will lead you to all the business you wish to have.
Since our field is mental health, that the timing is really right. So this is the main learning point for us at this time, to know that we cannot wait in order to make an impact here in Kenya.
I think the most important thing that I've learned or experienced here in this trip around was the willingness for the Kenyan people to actually embrace technology and look into the future of digitalization.
Okay, so just a quick brief around that video. So usually under Trade Estonia or Enterprise Estonia, we organize trade missions to different countries. This was the last trade mission last month to Nairobi, and the companies happened to meet partners. They were able to interact, find out about the market and what the market needs. So this is one of the things we do as Team Estonia, which is a collaboration between Enterprise Estonia, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, SDEV, and everyone in that ecosystem around Africa. So if you want more information, let me know, and I'll be able to share with you a bit about that. Moving on quickly to the next panel, and I'll invite Kadi to come and invite her panelists. And as Kadi comes, Kadi has also been to Nairobi. At least she came when there was no flooding. So I don't know, what was your experience in Nairobi?
Well, it was a nice break from Estonian autumn, first of all. It was in September. It was already rainy and cold here, so it was a lot of warmth to go through winter. But yeah, in Kenya, I met a lot of clean tech entrepreneurs and some support organizations there. It was really insightful to see what are the trends there. And I hope with the panel we can delve into that now. So I will call to the stage first, please, Nancy. So Nancy is working for the Moi University and is a textile researcher. Please have a seat. Welcome. Then we have Marem with us, who is the lead African 500 Global. And we will hear more about what you're doing at 500 Global. Thank you for coming and joining us. And then we have Robin, who is from eAgronom, which is an Estonian company working in different African countries. Welcome, Robin, as well. Thank you. But before we go into our panel discussion, we have someone joining us online. So it's Ariane Labat, who is working for the European Commission. She is the head of unit for science, technology, innovation, and digitalization. And let's hear what she has to say for the panel.
Good day, colleagues. It's my great pleasure to join you online for this very interesting panel. Thank you again for the organizer of the Africa Business Forum in Tallinn 2024. I'm sorry I couldn't join in person, but nonetheless I will offer you some thoughts coming from DG International Partnership, Science, Technology, Innovation and Digitalization Unit. Clean tech as a shared ambition definitely is an exciting topic for the panel. So from our side, from Team Europe side, let me offer you 3 examples how we invest and believe in international cooperation, in driving innovation together, and in supporting a global twin transition that works for people and leaves no one behind. First, why we want to do this. We know there is a global infrastructure gap, infrastructure investment gap, and particularly in Africa. This is what our leaders ask us to look into, to bridge this gap with innovative approaches and innovative partnerships. From the European side, our value proposition to address this infrastructure gap is to work through Global Gateway offer for partnership. The Global Gateway offer is really focused on the priorities set by the Africa-EU leaders, namely digital transition, transport connectivity, climate and energy, and also mainstreaming education and research throughout everything we do, plus health also, of course, sorry. So this is really our philosophy. We are coming together, the European Union, the member state like Estonia who is welcoming us today, and we are coming as public sector together with our businesses, our financial institutions, and more broadly our civil society and academia. We are coming to work together with African partners on partnership that makes a difference, that have an impact on the ground, to build faster, better, some key infrastructure. Some examples, as I promised. First example, we invest into developing the Digital Green Innovation Initiative together with member states. This is an initiative that we are busy designing, preparing contracts, but in the spirit. And very, very soon on the ground, it will be an initiative to develop smart innovation on the ground through SME boost, through hackathons, and really betting on the green and digital technology of future, as well as greening the digital sector. Secondly, we invest in the European programs for space, both Earth observation and satellite navigation. And these programs are heavily invested in as well as regards the use cases in Africa and building the capacities through the AUC of the local partners to use these different space capabilities. This is definitely already used by some of you to manage your forests, your inland waterways, transport, to manage your fleet of renewable energy and your future investment in this space. We really layer the strength of the European assets, the Copernicus system, GMES for Africa, and through that we develop together with you some partnership to roll out more services, more innovation locally. Thirdly, we as Team Europe, we believe a lot in bridging the digital divide, because that's a way to leapfrog multiple other sectors of the economies in Africa to faster growth, to greater prosperity. We do that in partnership with our African partners to really invest in key connectivity links, be it subsea cables or last mile innovation. And when we do that, we have definitely an approach that is sustainable, meaning we look at the twin transition opportunities and we look into investing into infrastructure that are energy efficient and clean. and in turn unlocking some local services that are needed for clean tech business to grow. These are just snapshots into what we are doing and what we want to do more and more with African partners. I look forward to meeting you in person to multiple other events, and I'm again very thankful to the organizer of the Africa Business Forum in Tallinn to allow me to be with you indirectly. Thank you.
Thanks to Ariane for this introduction. But without further ado, let's dive into how one can do or build sustainable business, a sustainable economy, really, in Africa. Let's look at what our panelists are doing in this field. Let's start with you, perhaps, Marem. Can you tell us what you're doing at 500 Global and how is it relating to a sustainable economy?
Sure. So 500 Global is a primarily US-based venture capital fund. We started in Silicon Valley. Now it's been about 14 years ago. And our focus as a venture capital firm is how do we invest in sustainable companies across the globe? And when we say sustainable, first, that means two things. Sustainable financially, so companies that are able to actually generate sustainable profit, as well as sustainable in terms of the positive contribution to the ecosystem. So today, we primarily invest in about 88 countries across the globe. Our focus on emerging markets makes it so that we come across companies in climate and sustainability quite often. And that is because today what we're especially realizing in some of these markets is that sustainability really is a complementary effect to profitability. And even if you want to find profitable businesses, a lot of the ones that are successful are the ones that can be sustainable over the long term.
Can you tell us, is it possible to invest, make returns, and for it to be sustainable?
That's what we get paid for.
Awesome. But Nancy, can you tell us what you're doing? So you're a textile researcher at Moi University. What do you do, and what is your relation to sustainability in your job?
Okay, thank you. At Moi University, we do a lot of research around sustainability in the area of textile and fashion. First, at the research stage, we encourage the students to do research that incorporates green technologies. So even if it's textile surface modification or anything related to that, we encourage the use of green methods like plant extracts and any other techniques that don't pollute the environment. And then now also extending to other projects that we have. We have a project which works with textile firms to encourage them to incorporate eco-innovation strategies in their manufacturing. You see, textiles pollutes, it's one of the largest polluters globally. So for us to be able to ensure that we reduce that, we are working with with small to medium companies to guide them on how they can incorporate eco-innovation strategies in their businesses. And then we also have another project that we are working with the Estonia Academy of Arts. This one now is on transferring up-made knowledge to Kenya. So we are working with the Estonia Academy of Arts as well as the Stockholm Environment Institute in Tallinn. So in that project now, we are encouraging the upcycling of post-industrial waste. So we get expertise from ECA. They come to Kenya, they train us, and then we are also working with a company that is linked to Moi University, Rivertex. So we are using that post-industrial waste to be able to come up with products to add value to that post-industrial waste. And then in that line also, yeah, there's a lot. We've even had students coming from ECA to come and do some designs and train people at Rivertex on how to be able to add value to that. So there's a lot of sustainability going around.
It's great to hear this. Not only research, but you're working on real projects that come to the real economy. So it's not only on paper. Yes. It becomes a reality.
Yes.
Robin, so you're an Estonian entrepreneur. What are you doing in this panel first? But tell us about what is your sustainable solution, and what are you doing in African countries?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So my name is Robin, and I'm coming from the farming family. So my father has 1,400 hectare organic grain farm, and my grandfather has same-sized conventional grain farm. So all my life I have been raised in the middle of those two worlds. But I ended up studying computer science, and then in 2016, my father needed a tool to manage our family farm. And since we didn't have anything good on the market at the time, I ended up building something for only our family farm. And then other farmers said that they want to start using it as well. And next thing you know, we have, well, today more than 2 million hectares managed with this tool. Now, about the sustainability and Africa. In the beginning, it was really a farm management tool. But already in the very first prototype, we had something called humus balance calculator. So humus is the richest part of the soil, and half of humus is carbon. And we had no business idea behind this or anything. We just wanted to communicate to farmers that every decision that they take also is influencing their soil. And then fast forward to, I think it was something like 2021, when we already had many farmers on board. We were looking for the next step for our company. And some companies, other big corporations, started approaching us saying that, hey, they have done a lot to reduce their emissions, but it's impossible to reach to zero emissions, and they want to compensate for the emissions that are left. And since we work with farmers, maybe we can figure something out. Farmers changing practices, storing more carbon in the soil, and they can kind of sponsor this activity. So we ended up launching our initially carbon offsetting program in 2021 summer, where farmers are changing practices, storing more carbon in the soil, and companies compensating, corporations compensating their emissions by supporting those farmers. But then soon we've realized, first of all, that it's way more than offsetting. So we work with food companies to help them to reduce emissions in their value chain. We work with banks to help them to give out green loans to farmers who apply sustainable practices. And then, I wanted to say recently, but it's certainly more than a year ago, we entered also African market. So we're working with around 200,000 landowners in Tanzania, Kenya, and Rwanda, and want to continue working with African farmers to improve soils in their countries, and also at the same time helping to, well, slow down the climate change as much as we can by storing more carbon in the soil.
It's good to hear. So we're really able to cover quite a few African countries, so we don't have to stick to one. I would really like to know, what are the past year's trends that you see? Perhaps, Marem, you can look at it from an investor's perspective. What has happened in the clean tech entrepreneurship or companies in Africa?
So when we look at the continent today, and I think it's important to now see that there is now a positive excitement around bringing in new technologies on the continent today in a way that wasn't the case 10 years ago. So today, if you look at especially the bigger markets, which are obviously, when we talk about the big four, it includes Nigeria, Egypt, South Africa, and Kenya. From a technology perspective, I think the most excitement across the board is definitely now in agri-tech. And I think agri-tech, because we've been talking about for the last years the importance for the continent to reach food production sustainability. And not only the importance for the continent to reach that, but also the continent's ability to do so. And so agri-tech, especially when we look at the founders today, the excitement and engagement we're seeing around agri-tech is nothing like any other sector. When we look at our pipeline, especially in some of those markets, we see a growth in companies that are building either sustainable solutions for farming, even now more so also contributing to financing farming, and also thinking about IoT as a predominant way to create basically clean farming. So on the agri-tech space, I think that from an investment perspective, it's something that we're seeing, but there is another interesting layer to that also comes around mobility. And mobility because, as some of you know, the continent has its fair share of challenges around mobility. And when we've talked about the position of clean tech within mobility, that used to be a completely foreign concept altogether. And when we see the pipeline of companies that we have today, we are now increasingly seeing that EV is becoming actually a topic on the continent. We're also seeing that batteries and battery production is also becoming a tech topic. But ultimately, I think for us, especially from an investor perspective, we really believe in the fact that innovation is driven by the interests of founders. So we don't force certain sectors of thesis on founders, because entrepreneurship is hard enough that it's important that founders are building something that they believe in and something that they're truly passionate and interested about. And so what we do from a trend perspective is we follow the founders. Where are the founders going to? Where are their interests in terms of these technologies? Where are their skills and their ability to develop? And that's how we define those trends.
Thank you very much. But now looking maybe more precisely in the textile sector, Nancy, what do you see talking to people? Do the people in Kenya, do they care about sustainability in the textile sector? And do people see the economic opportunities in there, be it for a job opportunity, be it for creating a company, for investing in it? Is it seen as an opportunity or more like an obligation, something we have to do?
Okay, thank you. In Kenya, like across the value chain, there's been interest in sustainability. We can start with for example, fiber stage, cotton growing. Now there's an interest on organic farming so that it becomes more environmentally friendly. Although it's a bit ambitious, because as much as it's environmentally friendly, it may not be necessarily economically viable for the farmers. So in that area, yes, there might be a lot of interest, but then is it really completely sustainable? And then when we move now to the companies, there is a lot of interest, especially in renewable energy sources for manufacture, particularly solar energy, because of the challenges with the cost of electricity and also because of the abundant sunlight that they can take advantage of. But the same scenario again comes in the cost of setup of those renewable energy methods. So as much as there is a lot of interest in the sustainability, is it completely viable right now? You know, if we are being realistic and we are really saying, do we want it to be, do we want to move that direction? What do we need to do to ensure that even as we are doing all these practices, everyone is benefiting across the value chain? So that's one thing. And then in terms of eco-innovation strategies, besides the renewable energy, we are also considering looking at areas of recycling, upcycling, the use of recycled fibers from the beginning, which also brings us again to the same problem, like now getting something that is completely sustainable, that will have good social impact, economic impact, and environmental impact is still a bit of a challenge right now, but the interest is there.
It's very good to know. So there is interest, but like everywhere else, I think the same question we ask ourselves in Estonia is it just? Is it approachable to everyone? And can, because otherwise we can't do it, right? Yes. On scale at least. But Robin, looking at your some years of experience in African countries, what have you seen change? And given that you're also in a quite regulated area of business, how have you seen the national objectives and regulation evolve in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think the biggest change has been in my own mindset, actually. But because, well, seeing the beginning going to Africa, thinking that it's quite difficult to get farmers to adopt some change, adopt more sustainable soil-friendly practices. But the truth is actually that it's even more difficult for us to promote these practices in Europe. Because it seems almost like African farmers feel the climate change more than European farmers. And also improving the soils is improving their production more compared to Europe as well. So warm climate, there is enough moisture, well, depending on the region, but where we operate, so it's fairly fast. The soil regeneration happens really fairly fast, and can already quickly give some productivity gains to African farmers as well. And that's the biggest change for, in our mindset at e-agronomy, is that we see that it's not only the carbon income that we are bringing to farmers, but it's mainly helping them to increase their yields and making more stable if there are extreme weather conditions. For example, there is long dry periods, and etc. That has been the biggest change that we have seen.
Well, that's very good to hear. Maybe I will come back a bit to the financial perspective of things. So we see that there is a wish and drive to build the green economy, but there are definitely a lot of challenges. So from a financing perspective, what are the main barriers holding back the development of a sustainable economy right now in Africa?
I think the first thing we observe in a lot of the businesses that are more green tech affiliated on the continent today is that a lot of them are, especially today, they are basically relying on government subsidies to be able to survive. And that's a big, big issue around creating these businesses to be sustainable. Because especially on the continent, we see that there is a lot of instability around governments. And so the companies that rely on these subsidies, I mean, we see a lot of them who basically can be out of business over a day or another because they don't currently have the business model that allow these companies to be reliable outside of these government subsidies. So I think that's definitely one of the first challenges. The second one is that we actually don't, when we think about the capital pool, we mix up equity investment as being the primary driver of sustainable technology. So when we think about the capital that these companies need, we think that all of it has to come from investors. But that's not true. The reality is that the capital really has to be divided in three pools. The first pool is the R&D pool, which is the research and development capital that they need to actually be able to figure out how the technology works. And that allows them to have the time to do the research, the time to do tests, the time to actually be able to produce something that can go on the market. And then you have the second part, which is the equity capital, which comes from investors like ourselves who believe in their technology and are funding them in order for them to take it out to market. And then you now have the third part of the capital pool, which is the working capital. And that's the debt and basically the loan part, which is the working capital that they now need to start scaling and inject more capital to get their products out. So if you think about those three buckets, one, on the continent today, obviously all three are very low in terms of their availability. Number one, which is R&D, is even lower, probably non-existent in a lot of markets. And then number three is very, very difficult to access for them because banks are not going to give them those loans or those debt packages. So today, the reality is that even though some of their technologies might be sustainable, on the financial part, it's not. And until we can figure out a way to make it financially sustainable, we are actually not bringing any value back to the continent. And that's the harsh truth, but it is the truth. Because if the farmers, if the business owners, if the employees are not actually able to make a living from the technologies that they're putting out in these markets, then are we actually solving for them, or are we solving from a perspective of an idea instead of reality?
It's very interesting. Actually, I would like to hear what Nancy has to think about it, because if financing R&D is one of the main barriers, yet you manage to do it. And I hear that you have partnerships with the Estonian university, but probably with more global universities and more European research institutions. How does this collaboration help you? In what ways? Is it access to financial resources? Is it access to experience? What do these collaborations give you?
First, of course, is the financial aspect. So you find most of what we do in the universities, we apply for research grants from large organizations that offer funding for that. But also within that collaboration, there is knowledge transfer. So between two parties, we gain knowledge from them, they also gain knowledge from them, and then there's also strengthening of relationships. So as much as the financial aspect is important, but then also the additional knowledge that we gain from that. And also even in terms of research, some institutions have got resources that we don't have. So when we need equipment for certain aspects, then we can work with other institutions. And then we also have some resources that those institutions don't have. So some people can come to Kenya because they need a particular plant for some green technology that they're doing. And then we take that plant back to their lab, we do the research from that side, and at the end of the day, it's a win-win for everyone.
That's very good to hear. And Robin, of course, you're looking at the barriers I guess you would like to expand your activities and your partnerships in African countries. What would help you go even further? Is it some sort of bilateral agreements between countries or multilateral? What is holding back and what could be done to improve your business development?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, what helped us to get started in the first was also Estonian government, Estonian Climate Ministry subsidy to enter Tanzania. And the main thing was that when we speak to venture capital funds, mainly in Europe, then they like our expansions in Spain or in Poland or in Sweden. But always if they see that, oh, you're expanding in Africa as well, they see this as a risk and don't want to necessarily to put their money on the table on that. So this grant helped us to get started and to prove that we can do sustainable business and profitable business in Africa. But what will help us to go further is that, well, beside our own activities, is to have a stable business environment. Obviously, at the same time, we need changes, we need the progress and so on, but some fundamentals should stay the same, and there should be this kind of stability to operate in the region.
Very interesting. I'm looking at the time that's running dangerously fast as always. It's been very interesting talking to you, and I've really gained that insight to where the barriers are, what we could be doing to kind of alleviate them. But maybe just to, before we end, what would be your wish, if you had one wish to make for the sustainable economy development in Africa in the coming years? What's your wish? Who wants to start?
Okay, I can start. Mine is more, of course, there's been a lot of education and awareness to everyone, but then I feel like it's more around the people who understand the language of sustainability. Previous speakers have talked about the barriers in language and communication, so I wish that we could go deeper and access everyone from whatever level they are at. Because now there's a lot of talk about the expanded producer responsibility, but I wish it could also go all the way to expanded consumer responsibility. And the consumers are the people out there, the ones that don't really fully understand this language of sustainability. So we can do a lot of work from our level, but if we don't reach out to the grassroots, to the communities down there, then we won't make much progress. That's my wish. Thank you.
Thank you.
My wish would be for these businesses and these models to be financially sustainable. I think it's incredibly important that we think about the communities and the grassroots members who are the ones who are on the receiving end of a lot of the work that we do. And if those people are not able to make a living from some of these directions, policies, innovations that we're putting out in the market, then for me, we're missing the point. So it's really for us to go back to those who are at the bottom chain and create value for them.
Thank you, Miriam.
In Kenya, we met a farmer. Well, he's a farmer, but he has every week group of farmers visiting his farm and center, where he's showing about practices that help to reduce the cost of fertilizers, helps to produce food more sustainably, in the sense that the yield is more stable. And I just hope that we will find a way to scale these kinds of operations all around, well, Kenya and then abroad as well. His work is amazing.
Thank you, dear panelists, for this amazing discussion we had. And I really have hope and faith as well after this panel that the sustainable economy in Africa and in partnerships between African and European countries in Estonia are going to get even faster and bigger in the coming years. Thank you so much. And thank you for the audience as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tadi, please receive a token of appreciation. Thank you very much. I think
Thank you.
Sustainability is what we're looking at. I think in Africa, in Kenya, from my experiences, you try many things, very many times, but things don't work out and you give up so quickly. So I hope the audience now know that you have to take time, get things done. And Robin, we've seen what you can do. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Right, our photo. Thank you. Right, so best part of the day, lunch. So as you gave me a hard time during the coffee break, until I had to get Daniel to project his voice for you to come back, lunch will not be that simple. If you don't move, I just take your plate away. Fair? So it's 12:30. I want us back into the room by 1:45 because the next session is starting at 2 p.m. and I want us to keep time so that we also have enough time for the breakout sessions. So, hey, come down, guys. Oh, I think that group knows where the lunch is. So, the lunch is downstairs at the restaurant. So, it's a buffet, self-service. So, pick something, sit down, meet someone new, come back with a new business card, and let's meet here at 1:45. Thank you, everyone. You want the water? Right. So good afternoon and welcome back. I hope you had a good lunch.
Let's press this.
I saw some people going for 4 rounds of dessert. So hopefully we keep it going enough. The next panel is around startups, which is a very exciting conversation. I think, especially for Africa, we're looking at startups and where that can go because that's where the majority of our people are. So Hannah and team, I hope you will give us exciting news that there's enough funding from this table to give everyone in the startup ecosystem. But before I start, Hannah, you know I always have to put you on the spot. Which is your best African country? Oh. And good luck because you might be lynched after this, so good luck with your answer.
We're watching you.
Oh no, well, I'm wearing a shirt that I got in Makala Market in Ghana, so I think I have to say Ghana. But it sounds like I'm in trouble already, so...
So I think for all the Africans
Joel,
in the
for that
room,
warm introduction.
Yeah, no, I was going to get something for you. So all the Africans in the room, if you want Hannah to be your favorite, please give her a piece of clothing by the end of this day. So Hannah, take it away. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad to see so many people excited about startups and here to listen to our talk today. My name is Hannah Swaby. I have 7 years of mobility experience in startups in Estonia. I've worked all over the African continent. This is a subject that I am very passionate about, and so is our amazing panel that we have here for you today. I would like to start by letting the panel introduce themselves to you, because I think in their own words they can put it the best. But I would challenge the panelists to tell us not only who you are, what you do for work, whereabouts on the continent you're located, but also what is your connection to Estonia and what actually brought you here today. So maybe we can start down at the far end.
All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Much better. Thank you very much. My name is Caroline Wanjihia. I'm Kenyan by birth. African by, maybe origin, but also Estonian by profession. Why do I say Estonian by profession? Lovely. I'm the regional director for Bolts in Africa and the international markets. So this is my home headquarters. And as you can see, or for those of you who may not know, I'm wearing the colors of the Estonian flag. So welcome to the home of Bolt. For those of you who may not have tried Bolt, please try it. We've got a variety of services for you to try. The Bolt ride. There's a Bolt micromobility for some of you who like, using their bikes around. So welcome, and I'm looking forward to engaging with you. Thank you.
Nice. My name's Caleb. I am Australian Ethiopian by origin. I guess living in Kenya, in Nairobi, same as Caroline. And I guess dress code Estonian too. So that's like my one claim to Estonia, unfortunately not by profession. But I'm the CEO of a company called Tech Safari. I've been operating across Africa for the last 6 years. But started Tech Safari about a year ago, really covering what's happening in tech across Africa. And through that, looking at how do we get the rest of the world engaged with what's happening in the continent. And that's how I met a lot of the folks in the room, Daniel, and many others who have sort of connected me to Estonia. Alongside Tech Safari, within that, we found that there's a lot of need for companies that want to expand to the continent. There's a few companies here that have headquarters here, but now have expanded. Bolt is one. There's many here who want to do the same. And so along developing that sort of agency that helps these companies expand onto the continent, we came across Latitude, and they hosted their first spin-off of Latitude 59 in Kenya in December last year. We were joined by a few of the folks here. It was a fantastic event, and we hosted them and helped them sort of launch into Kenya. And so that's my first connection with Estonia. Yeah, sure, let's hear it. Latitude is a fantastic conference. And so far I've just been loving it. It's been a fantastic time. I went to a swamp the other day. It's a very surreal place, I think, coming from Kenya. So it's been a great time so far.
Hi everyone, my name is Aziza. I'm Tunisian, based in Tunis, and I'm part of Brighter Bridges. And Brighter, actually, it's a data and market intelligence company. What we do is that we provide data, insights, and intelligence on emerging markets, specifically on Africa, because we believe that there is a knowledge gap when it comes to data on the innovation investment scene in Africa, and our mission is to kind of build the knowledge infrastructure in order for us to stimulate innovation investment on the continent. And actually, we connected with Estonia through the work that Daniel has been doing in building bridges with the continent and also with the Latitude team. So actually, we also worked with them last year for the Kenya edition in Africa, and we'll be collaborating for sure for this year. So I hope to see you all in Kenya. Thank you.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is Chidi, and I am Nigerian. Also, I call myself a true Pan-African because I don't have a base. I just show up wherever they need me, and I'm there on the continent. But I do live in Atlanta. What I do, so right behind me it says I'm a managing principal, of Red Cola. Red Cola is a product management consulting and coaching agency. And I coach entrepreneurs, I coach CPOs, CEOs on building products that their customers love. But that's also translated, I think earlier they were talking about ALU. So all the ALU people that you saw today, those are my people. Those are public sector leaders across the continent that are here this week to immerse with the Estonian ecosystem. So Ambassador Daniel is one of our hosts. We're here to also attend Latitude 59, and I'm one of the faculty that teaches, that's actually trying to get our public sector leaders to become product people, right? Because it's not just the private sector, right? The public sector also, we need to deliver products that our citizens love and need. So that's the connection with Estonia. We've been coming here, this is our second time to come here. And I was also at Latitude 59 in Kenya, which was awesome. And so let's talk.
It's a fantastic mix of different experiences and different geographies, and I think we're really lucky to have such a diverse panel today to be able to discuss these topics with. I want to dive right into the core of it, which is Africa is a huge continent, 54 different countries. I think one of the things that comes up is just how does a startup even decide where to start? How do you pick that first market if you want to enter into the continent? Carolyn, I'm going to look at you. Bolt's operating in over 45 different countries. I mean, not all on the continent, but I think you have some incredible experience on expansion and growth. So maybe you can start by talking a little bit about how do you pick a market and how do you get started?
Okay. So in Africa, we started in around 2016. And in fact, our first market to launch was South Africa. Now, what were we looking at? At the time when we looked at, what the economists and statisticians were telling us in terms of urban population, this was going to double, say till 2040. So urban population was growing, and with that also urbanization. Now, also, what was then happening, despite the rapid growth in urban population, the infrastructure was not growing at the same pace. So we saw an opportunity for us to really come in and democratize transport within the continent. At the same time, we also saw a huge penetration of mobile phone usage and internet. Yeah, I think one of our speakers today told us penetration is not the issue, usage was actually growing. So therefore, that was a good opportunity for us to convert these people into ride-hailing. For those of us conversant with ride-hailing, it requires internet and mobile phone usage. The other thing that was happening at the time is high levels of unemployment, which still persist. In Africa, I'm told the levels of unemployment are between 80 to 30%. So ride-hailing then was a good opportunity for these drivers to just have an opportunity to earn an income within their own terms. Yeah, so those were some of the things that were quite good opportunities for us to use then to step into Africa. Since we've been able to launch in 5 additional markets, and I'm quite excited to hear a number of the panelists talk about my markets. Tunisia, we're in Ghana, we're in Nigeria, we're in South Africa, we're also in East Africa, Kenya, and the Tanzania. So yeah, those are some of the things that we sort of leveraged on in the beginning.
Super, and I think like everything that you're mentioning in terms of data, I think Aziza, you've seen it all in the African market. Is there a different way that you need to look at data or things to keep in mind when you're looking at data on the continent that we can share?
Yeah. So actually, exactly what you said, Hannah, at the beginning. When we speak about Africa, we need to remember that it's a continent, and we are speaking about 54 countries on the continent, and each country has its own specificities. And I think when a startup is considering an expansion to the African market, it is very important to make sure that you do the homework, as we say, like that you look at the data, see if there is a market there, if there is an interest in the market. Like I think this is what Bolt, like Caroline from Bolt has been referring to. It's very important to also be aware of the consumer behavior when it comes to also the readiness of the market. Does it have the infrastructure needed? Caroline mentioned the internet penetration, the mobile usage. So depending on the solution of the startup, I think there is some work that needs to be done prior to the expansion project in order to make sure that you minimize the risk and that you have a successful expansion. And this is kind of the things, one of the things that we do at Brighter. What we do is that we try to kind of assess the readiness of the markets in Africa specifically, and it could be like a useful tool for startups considering expansion.
I think a lot of the times too, what startups run into challenges of is building these local partnerships and finding these local providers of services to help them to understand and to analyze that data that companies like you are providing. So
exactly, I think also considering having a local partner or a local representation actually on the markets that you are going to enter is very important, because having a local person or a local partner in general can help you to minimize the risk, because they know the market, they are on the ground, they can interact more easily, etc. So I think also having or considering a local partnership is also key to also when exploring the expansion for a startup in Africa.
And Chetty, when you're coaching CEOs, do you tell them, is there any markets particularly that you warn them are more challenging than others, or is it always very specific to the businesses that they're bringing? Or
yeah, I mean, when you think about it, you said 54 countries, right? 54 administrations, 54 regulatory environments, 54. I mean, you're talking all kinds of languages, right? So ultimately, what problem are you looking to solve, right? I mean, you can't Control C and then Control V on a continent. And even, you know, one of the most powerful startups or startup stories in Africa, M-Pesa, they couldn't do a Control C from Kenya to the next country. They actually learned the very hard way that that doesn't work. So, you know, if you're trying to do that, right, and just come to Africa and just say, okay, we're going to go to that country. I always kind of get down to, you know, do the work, do the discovery work. I'm a product guy, so get yourself immersed, do something, run an experiment, find out where you need to go. And then you go there and use the data to determine, okay, is this the right place for us to do this? Are these problems? Do these people have our problems, right? Because many times you think they have the same problem, they don't, right? And so that is a key conversation that I have with these folks, is to say, okay, get the discovery work. And look, Bolts is Bolts. I mean, one of the per capita unicorns in Estonia, as you like to remind us all the time, right?
We're very proud.
And
we are
very proud, right? But the thing is, Bolts, you know, very well funded, very well managed, and you came to Africa and you did all that work. Not everybody has that luxury, okay? And, you know, again, you talk about local partners, they are struggling to be able to even do that kind of work, right? So I think that the council has always been discovery. You do discovery on the problem, you understand the market, but also understand who are the local partners, right, that can help you. Because, not everybody's Bolt, not everybody's Wise, right? Not everybody's Skype. There are folks who are, you know, trying to just figure it out. And so the council is always, bottom line, what's the value prop? Are you really trying to solve a problem that they have? Right?
I think it's a great segue into the next portion, which is talking about the success stories. You know, you mentioned Bolts, of course. I'm going to mention it again, but I think Africa as a continent has 7 homegrown unicorns. So this is fantastic. It's something that I think, Caleb, you know, through your reporting, obviously you know a lot about these success stories. But I think how do we take the experiences of these success stories, both the domestic and also the ones that are coming in from abroad, and how do we leverage this to build more amazing and incredible startups?
Yeah, totally. So I think we'll probably talk about this a little bit.
Do we have mic for Caleb?
Hello, testing.
Oh.
Yeah, Caleb is not supposed to speak. So
used to be.
We cut him off. We took him out.
Can everyone hear me anyway? At the back?
Maybe not.
They can't?
Yeah.
Can you hear me at the back, or? Yeah, you can? All right.
Ah, okay,
We'll
good.
Continue and then hopefully the mic.
I think the mic is coming to you.
Okay.
But maybe I'll jump over to Chetty first then, because Chetty's also been dealing with success stories. And does the Bolt story help? Does the unicorn chasing help? Or does more need to be done in the continent to actually support these locally grown businesses and get things started?
Yeah, so, you know, look, Bolts is Bolts. Bolt is not an African unicorn, right? It's an Estonian unicorn. And so to the extent that Bolt is successful in doing what it's doing, I know, Caroline, I don't know if we're piling on you or if we're not. We'll see by the end of this if you're still speaking to me, right? But the challenge with unicorns and trying to, you know, build these unicorns. And remember, unicorns are based on valuation, right? They're not revenue companies. So that means that maybe they've raised a whole bunch of money. You know, Bolt is showing that, you know, Bolt has revenue. They actually have a bottom line that is sustainable and that allows them to do business over there. The challenge is that 7 unicorns, you know, in Africa, and then that becomes a metric that is used to determine how hard or how easy it is to do business in Africa. Meanwhile, there's, you know, Caleb will tell you, there are a lot of companies that are doing very well in Africa. They're not unicorns, right? What they are is that they're solving real problems. And to the extent that some of them have avoided going after the VC money, there's advantages to that, right? And then there's some who got the VC money and imploded, right? And they imploded because, you know, there's this saying that success is not because of starvation, it's because of gluttony, right? And so we want to make sure that our startups are not chasing funding or chasing unicorn status just to say we have unicorns. We want Wises, we want Bolts, we want Skypes. We want companies that are actually doing real good. And so, you know, I think chasing unicorns, I am not a big believer, right, in the unicorn status. I'm a big believer in we're making money, we're hiring people, we're solving problems, wicked problems. Africa, we are wicked problem central, right? Wicked problem central. So come and solve problems. Don't come there trying to get yourself a market that will now give you unicorn status, right? You get money and you get a valuation. I think that starts to become a challenge for many of us.
Solving real problems. I think that's a great way to just start by assessing the people that are coming in and what they want to do. Caleb, do you want to jump back on success stories?
Yeah, for sure. So I think Chidi makes a great point. Like, we always point to the number of unicorns we have in a country. I did a post on Estonia, like arriving in Estonia yesterday, and I was talking about how it's a tech country, and I think is it 10 unicorns in Estonia
10
today? 10?
I think the last time we checked.
Yeah, which it could be 11 now, to be honest. But you know, that's a great metric, right? Like 10 companies worth $1 billion. But I think on the continent, across Africa, and just generally, like, value is not an indicator of like true money being made or true returns. And I think going a step deeper, like, it's not just like, are we making money or are we hiring more people? It's like, are we returning that money? And I think that to me is the like sort of hallmark of like an ecosystem that works. And we have a lot of unicorns. We have 7 unicorns, but not as many exits. And that's what I hope that we're going to see a lot more of in the next like 3 to 5 years, especially as funding dries up and its appetite kind of like, is a bit more skeptical about the continent. An example of this going well is a pretty well-known story across the continent, Paystack. Paystack, and it also ties into this idea of like launching with local partners. So Paystack is a payments company, allows e-commerce companies to transact. Payments are just such a nightmare across the continent, especially, I found it tough in Nigeria as well, like making international payments. And so like they allowed merchants to accept payments globally. And Stripe, which is the biggest payment company in the world, or like the biggest payment company in the US, invested in Paystack to have a local partner to see how they operated. Paystack goes out to raise a Series B, and instead they get an acquisition offer from Stripe for $200 million. That's like a great example of a company working with a local partner to enable them, give them expertise, and then actually acquire them, take the next step. But then what it does for our ecosystem is it means that now all of the employees of Stripe have money, and so they're investing in other startups, their friends' startups. We now have I don't know if there's an Estonia mafia or like a Skype mafia, but we have a Paystack mafia, which is just all the founders that have gone on to build amazing companies that are growing, and they all sort of invest in each other. They get their first checks from their employees, and also a lot of the angel investors and VCs that invested in Paystack have now gone on to invest in way more companies. Like, there were so many more angels after 2020 investing back into Nigeria. And so I think these are sort of the success stories we need, where people actually get their dollars back and they keep investing in the ecosystem. And also where global companies, like, we want to invest in these companies to see them grow as well. So I think that's a great success story on sort of all levels.
I think that's some of the exciting things we've seen starting to come out of Bolt, is that we have some of our former country managers that are now launching their own businesses on the continent and doing incredible things. And we're still formerly Bolt, not Weir anymore. They're still doing fantastic things, but also former team members are now starting to build that mafia presence, and it's expanding. Carolyn, like, maybe you can tell some of these success stories, or one really good one that you've had in the last year with launching a market, or with growing a market, or overcoming a challenge that you faced in a new space.
Okay, and maybe I'll also just use that to share some of why Bolt is where it is today, at least in Africa. What we've tried to do is use our local solutions, but to address local challenges, which I think has been a consistent theme throughout the day-to-day. How do you use the existing products to address local challenges? When we first launched in 2016, across most of our African markets, they are cash-based economies. Now imagine if when we launched, we went and introduced Bolt, but payment using a card system. We'd never be where we are today. So what we did is revolutionize payment. We allowed our riders and our drivers to actually use a cash-based system that had largely been ignored by some of our competitors. So that gave us an edge. So speaking to localization of the existing challenges that the riders or the community is facing. But then it just doesn't stop there. You have to continuously innovate to tap into this. Once we had launched and now we were full cash-based, what happened? M-Pesa hit the world. So if we had limited our payment options to cash, that means you're locking out quite a number of users on the platform. So it's figuring out what's happening, but then continuously innovating. Then along the way, yes, we had good mobile penetration and good internet. but the usage was very low. Again, our drivers need internet, they need phones. So we had to actually partner with some of the mobile manufacturers to ensure that the phone that the drivers are using, they actually can log onto the app. Partnerships, again, that enable them to be able to get data packages at good prices. Yeah, so it's not one-stop, one innovation that fits all. Again, another example, sorry, I'm using quite a number of examples, but just, to bring it home. In East Africa, those from Kenya and Tanzania, you find that a lot of the riders use something we call motorbikes, borders, yeah? In Europe, ride-hailing was a four-wheeler opportunity. We then had to open up to two-wheelers. There were concerns around safety. So what did we do? Make sure that the same way we vet the drivers for the vehicles is the same way we are vetting the people operating borders. So it continues. And that again opened us to a segment that hadn't been tapped to globally. Now, recently and within the East Africa space, sustainability is a big thing. So what do? Advance it to the EV motorbikes. But initially, they're very expensive. Again, partnerships with manufacturers, with financiers to bring the cost down. So I think if I was to summarize the Bolt success story, our product, but localization to address the local challenges. Is it one-off? Absolutely no. There's a challenge every other day. How do we innovate to address that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it sounds like you've hit all of those problem points right on to really actually solve real issues, like you're saying. So excellent. I think that transitions us into talking about challenges. And I think when I think about expansion, and I remember my expansion days as well, localization and bringing a European company into the African continent comes with a lot of challenges. It comes with regulatory challenges. It comes with social challenges. I mean, often you're bringing an HQ-based support team down into multiple markets simultaneously, and you run into cultural clashes and challenges of communication. And I'm just wondering, for teams, what is the best way to approach this? How do we try and harmoniously expand our businesses and build culture that's going to be synonymous with what we were starting on the European continent if we're going into African markets? Maybe Chedi, I'm going to throw this one to you first.
I was writing, please don't ask me.
It's not an easy one.
Oh, and by the way, I had no idea I was wearing Estonia's colors. Like literally, I just put them on and I'm looking at her and I'm like, wait a minute, what the hell? So Daniel, I don't know what you did to me, but so that's a good question. Doing business in Africa is hard. And I don't say that because it's Africa. Doing business is hard, but doing business in Africa is hard, right? And again, we've kind of talked about how it's a fragmented market, period. I'm sure Caroline could speak to this. It's a fragmented market. Doing business is hard, but you can't look at Africa as incremental. A lot of folks look at Africa as incremental to their bottom line. You know what? We're just going to go expand over there. And what that does, you kind of get knee-jerky. If things start to kind of look wishy-washy, especially you see what our VCs are doing, the foreign VCs have essentially kind of repatriated from Africa because of what you would call the global kind of financial crisis. And that's an incremental kind of mindset. It has to be fundamental. You have to look at it, Bolt, right, as a fundamental part of your business. Once you do that, it allows you to really think about how you expand, how you attack the market, even when the challenges come, right? And so, when things are hard, at the C level, you start to see, and I say any CFOs in the room, I'm pointing at you, when you start crunching your numbers, using Aziza's data, start crunching numbers, Africa's looking kind of freaky, and then you start running away. No, this is a long-term play. You are here to play. And if you show that long-term commitment to the continent, we are on your side. We will back you. The public sector will back you. The citizens will back you, right? But if there's that wishy-washy kind of, things are looking kind of funky, so we're going to withdraw from this market, or we're going to pull our team from that market. Microsoft, and they're not a startup. I know. They used to be, but, they just essentially eliminated their, Africa Development Center in Lagos. Everybody is gone, right? That is kind of a wishy-washy kind of approach to things. We're looking for startups. We're looking for companies that are coming on the continent, and we see, they see the continent as fundamental. So that starts to kind of bring more success. But there are challenges, and those challenges you have to address them head on as opposed to trying to run away from them.
It sounds like they've left a lot of really good talent on the table, though.
So if anybody's looking, I know people, I know all of them. Okay, I don't know all of them, but I know many of them. There are a lot of people who are ready to come and do some hard work. So, let them know.
Super.
Yeah. On that, I think what is key when we speak about expansion for Africa specifically, because as Shidi said, like working in Africa and building and doing business in Africa can be challenging. So the idea is making sure that the product is relevant actually for the market, and making sure that you also have on the back of your mind that you are going to adapt. Exactly what Caroline has pointed out in terms of, for example, the payment method that they have adapted based on the method, like payment method that the population is using. For example, in Tunisia, unfortunately, until now, we are very like cash-based like economy in general, but it's starting to shift. But like, for example, Bolt is available with that payment method. So making sure that the product is relevant for the market you're expanding to, taking the time to adapt, being consistent, also making sure that you are on the ground, but consistently adapting, innovating, being like knowing how the market that you are now expanding to is evolving and adjusting your product accordingly. So yeah, relevance, being on the ground, and consistency, because I believe that it takes time. And when you are willing to do business in Africa, you need to be ready for it, and you really need to want to, actually. You don't have to perceive Africa as just like a big consumer base. Like, you really need to think about the impact, actually. What impact am I going to generate when expanding? Am I going to create more jobs? Am I going to, like the impact metric and the impact factor is super important also to consider when expanding.
Absolutely.
Carolyn, I think like you obviously have this HQ based here in Estonia, but you're also running an HQ out of Kenya for the continent. How are the people working? How do you make sure that everybody is working together and harmoniously? And maybe you can touch a little bit on this talent side and how we build teams.
Okay. So again, the keyword localization. So there's a lot that we borrow from the HQ. But how do we then localize it to the Kenyan context? But also culturally, people are very different, in terms of male gender balance. Yeah, so just adapting to that localization has helped us. And what you also find within the African context as well, we have a lot of female empowerment. So if I look at my Africa leadership globally as Bolt, I think 42% of our leaders are female. Now, in Africa, it's slightly higher, just taking into consideration the high levels of female empowerment, that is happening on the ground. But I just want also to touch on a question that you asked, and I feel I should give an answer to, on the challenges of operating, within the continent. As you said, Africa is not for the faint-hearted, but it's something that you invest in long term. One of the things when we were expanding into ride-hailing that we faced is really around regulation. And I want to look at regulation on a two-pronged approach. First, it was a challenge because ride-hailing hadn't existed. And whenever we tried to operate, the governments would equate us to taxis. We're like, no, we're not taxis. We're ride-hailing. So it was very difficult. And also, when governments don't, and I say this in the most polite way, when governments don't know what to do with a sector, they tend to be reactive. And some of the legislation they'll pass will be prohibitive to industry. So that's why I say then the absence of regulation then created an opportunity for us to then now partner with governments and begin to define this is what the ride-hailing regulations should look like. Yeah, it's still a journey that we are on. So that then they begin to see us as partners. They're already seeing us, but how do we take it beyond legislation that you use for revenue making, but legislation that you also use to drive infrastructure development? You can imagine as Bolt, the amount of mobility going across. Yeah, so in a day we have about 1 million rides in Africa. You can imagine if we shared that data with government, what sort of information that you would use to drive infrastructure development. Yeah, so regulation didn't exist in the beginning. Now we are beginning to work together to then shape how the the future then looks like.
And I'm guessing it's a lot of your local team on the ground is building those relationships with government, but then you're going back to your Estonian HQ as well and having to coordinate. So it's a lot of working between people, and I can imagine it keeps you busy.
Yes,
can I very quickly
of
say
course.
something? So is the Bolt case is very interesting because another conversation you should have is, even when your product is there are behaviors that your product inadvertently would encourage. And I'm sure you probably know where I'm going. In Nigeria, when I use Bolt, it's actually become a communication service as opposed to a ride-hailing service. Because what happens is I get a Bolt, and then the person calls me and is like, dude, I don't want to use the app, right? You could just show up, pay me $20, and we can go where we need to go. I see the Bolt people rolling their eyes because I know there's an issue. But that, I think that's an opportunity. I don't think there's an opportunity there. You might want to stamp it out, but there's an opportunity. I don't know what that opportunity is. Or let me say this, I do, but you're going to have to pay me so I can tell you guys what it is. But that's also part of the challenge is you come in thinking you're solving one problem, then you create a new problem. And are you interested in solving that problem, or do you think it's prohibitive, right, to your bottom line? So I just wanted to put that on the table.
Caroline, do you want me to bounce that back to you, or Caleb?
Let me add to that. I think that is really interesting on user behavior and what happens when you actually bring a product or launch a product on the continent, and what you think people will take out of it versus what they will. Has anyone here heard of M-Pesa in Kenya? Hand up. Cool. Okay, cool, great. So M-Pesa is mobile money. It's the first success story, major success story of mobile money. It's how I pay for everything in Kenya, and it now has 55 million users, so just massive scale. But when it started, it was used as a way for people to access financing. So it was mostly loans. So how do you access financing in rural areas? Through airtime, so actually mobile credit. But what they found was people were like, oh, actually, I can send money to my family up north, without having to physically give them cash. And they found that they had basically stumbled on this, penicillin for fintech. They had people moving money like crazy, just rapidly through airtime. And so they actually stumbled on this use case of mobile money rather than trying to invent it. So something really interesting things happen when you bring a product to a new market like that. Maybe not understanding the use case, but just testing, and then adapting to that as well as you're launching.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to come right back to you because I had my next question was for you as well. But I think when we're talking about challenges, building trust and brand awareness is something that's very different on the African continent versus in other markets. And working at Tech Safari and promoting the companies that are in the market, what recommendations do you have for them? How do they kind of tap into what makes consumers comfortable with services or what's different?
Yeah. I think that exists on a lot of levels. So how do you make a consumer comfortable with your service, product, etc., versus how do you so actually a lot of the companies I work with are startups, and they're startups that are sort of seed stage to growth stage. Or they might be more established companies that want to expand onto the continent, so say Nigeria, Kenya. The first way, which is how do you make global companies seem credible and valid, is it actually is a local partner. In a lot of cases, we work with companies, some here, others across Europe, that want to expand, but they want to do it locally with someone who's on the ground, who has trust, who's built community. We have done that at Tech Safari just through fairly engaging content that tells people about what's happening and is kind of a resource for the ecosystem. So I think partnering with a local partner that is credible is sort of step one. But I think the interesting thing, and probably the lesson that's a bit harder to get, is if you're a startup building in Africa, on the continent, a place where generally you will eventually need global capital to expand, there really isn't enough capital to go to become a massive outcome within Africa. And so you need to go global. Now, how do you go global when most of the investors that would invest in you don't actually get it, or they're instantly just they're not really there. They're looking at their own markets, their home markets. And so that to me is kind of the challenge that I think local founders need to embrace, which is how do I actually tell my story globally from day one? And how do I communicate that globally from day one, and sort of build trust? And I think a lot of that comes down to just being open about the work you're doing, building those relationships early, I mean, there is this whole thing of like build, locally, solve a problem. That's true. But you should also be looking at how do you communicate that globally. I think that's essential if we want to expand and we want to actually capture that capital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Caleb is doing a great job with that, right? I mean, Caleb's newsletter tells some really great stories. The other newsletters, Meka Jene, who does the same kind of work, please, subscribe to these newsletters. Talk to these guys. Talk to myself. Talk to Ambassador Daniel. There are folks who are actually kind of doing this work and know what's going on. We are, I'm battle tested. I have a company that failed on the continent. And that in of itself, I have data that many of you will never have, right? Especially, how to pay your bills when you don't have any money. And so, it's a very important thing to make sure that you tap into these environments, understand what's going on, keep your ears on the ground, right? And kind of get away from the mythology, right? Because there's a lot of mythology. Even on the continent, Nigeria is a place to go. Why? Because we have 250 million people. Meanwhile, Rwanda that has maybe 8 million, we don't want to do business. Meanwhile, Rwanda has one of the most robust platforms for you to build a product, right? If you want to build a product, you go to Rwanda, they see themselves as what they call experiment capital or the testing capital. If you want to build an MVP because they have the power, the infrastructure, they have an administration that is very interested, right, in you coming there and doing the work. They're actually quite wide open, right, in terms of doing business. So that's how you get your story out there. And so that would be my encouragement, right? Kind of talk to the right people and pay them too. So that's the other thing. No, seriously, there's a tendency for kind of advisory roles and all these, and then you kind of find out that it's just like a ceremonial role, right? And I'm going rogue on you. She said, don't go rogue on me. I'm going rogue. It's a ceremonial role. No. We're just as badass as anybody else out there. So bring, folks in to help you, but also pay them their value so that they actually can bring, because you'll see, you'll get half-assed work if you decide not to pay people or to give them the value that they bring to the table.
And I would say, also, if you're working with a local partner to launch your product, service, etc., on the continent, you want them to be bought in. You really want them to be on board with you, aligned to your mission. And yeah, obviously part of that is getting them on board, but a lot of that is also just paying them what they're worth. And I think I've heard of a lot of companies that have tried launching globally, in Kenya, Nigeria, but it's been half-assed because they've just been hey, can you help us out? Rather than this is actually a partnership. And I think that's where it comes down to finding the right partner, trusting them, but also really investing into that relationship and doing it for the long haul. Not just running a sort of short experiment to test out Africa.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the cost of talent is often one of these things that we forget on our expansion checklists. Actually, Caleb and I had a great conversation about the expansion checklist and process and how do you really consider which markets to go into. And I think you look at the size of a market, often the very first thing people say is, oh, look at the population size. That's our business opportunity. This, you couldn't be more wrong. I think anyone who's done an expansion in the room is shaking their heads because you need to be solving a problem and you need to know which people have that problem and then all the other variables that are going into things. So I think maybe from the data standpoint, how do we tell us more about the data on the market that we can be accessing or that we should be accessing, but besides just population sizes.
Yes. So actually, I agree with what Chidi said when it comes to staying up to date and hearing and reading about what's happening in the ecosystem. I mean, there is a lot of newsletter. I think Tech Safari is a great one that definitely need to be checked. Also, what we do at Brighter is we have a platform actually called Brighter Intelligence, which provides data that tracks investment deal flow on the African continent. So actually, when you log in, you can basically see the funding flow, the fundraising actually for startups based on the sector by year, etc. And it gives you an idea of the dynamics of the ecosystem. We also have a newsletter called Brighter Eye. It's a monthly newsletter actually, and it gives you updates on the state of innovation investment in Africa and what are the top sectors, what are the most active investors, and it kind of gives you an idea about, as I said, the dynamic, the activity of the ecosystem. But I think also looking at the macroeconomic data. Mm-hmm. Is super important when expanding because you need to understand, for example, if we take the Bolt as an example of a startup who expanded. I think also one of the things that needs to be checked is, are there any competitors on the market that I'm going to expand to? So also the competition analysis and understanding who's already operating, who's already already starting to solve this problem. Can we think more of a partnership, or maybe investing and then acquiring, like Uber and Careem, for example, in Egypt? So I think there is a lot of ways to navigate, but data remains, I think, one of the biggest starting points that needs to be thought of when considering an expansion project.
Yeah.
So macroeconomic, but also understanding the dynamic of the market.
Actually, you just introduced me to the Brighter platform yesterday. It's fantastic. It's, as an expansion manager, it's something I would have liked to have had my hands on back in the day.
And actually, it's there is a freemium version, it's accessible to everyone. And I advise everyone, if you really want to make sense of what's happening in the ecosystem, you can just go to Brighter Intelligence, create an account, and it's easy for free. The first version, so yeah.
Chetty, I think you're going to like this one, but I used to say to my team that there's, data for good and data for evil. And when it comes to making a business case, people are always going to collect what they want to make the business case they want to see.
Absolutely.
How do you kind of direct CEOs to be really staying focused on solving the problem and focused on actually looking for the market where they can best make their solution rather than maybe where their personal interests are coming into play?
Yeah, so, if you're looking at Africa and you say, okay, I need to build a go-to-market strategy, right? Then that's where you start to see people get into trouble. Because, you're looking at her data and you're saying, Nigeria or Kenya, South Africa. In fact, remember when the only country that was getting all the business was South Africa, right? Because of whatever data was out there and everything pointed to South Africa, right? And so I say, look, put the go-to-market strategies to the table for now. And let's kind of get into real kind of product management principles, which is, what problem are we solving? I mean, I think all of us on this stage agree. What problems are we solving? And where do those problems, where are they more acute? Or let's say, what environments give us the best opportunity to find out whether this is a problem we should be solving, as opposed to, deploying a solution that's looking for a problem, right? And I know that's cliche, but that's true. A lot of solutions come on the continent looking for problems to solve. And so I think that the council, as a coach or as a consultant, is let's just figure out whether, just go there, go somewhere and run some experiments, right? Don't make any big noises. Shoot, you could even go undercover as, if you're a Bolt, you go there and say, our name is Freeze or something, I don't know. And, you say Freeze, or just some little thing, and you see whether that works out for you. Or you use local partners, right? You use a local partner to run some experiments, right? And they don't have to cost you a whole bunch of money, so that if they fail, your reaction isn't, Africa's too hard, we're out, right? Your reaction is, okay, we learned some really cool things, so we're going to, cliche, pivot, or we will figure out something else to do, or, we build a communication system called Bolt Communications for taxi drivers to communicate with riders, right?
I think we're getting into a product pitch now.
I know. Bolt, I'm right here. So that would be my counsel.
Super. Anybody else want to touch on data for good, data for evil, and thinking how to use it to move your business? Okay. We're dated out. We've got 15 minutes left. I think I would like to give the panel the opportunity to talk a little bit about the future and what the biggest trends are that we're seeing for tech in Africa going into 2025, and what kind of opportunities are being presented. Now, you don't have to give away all of your ideas now. I think maybe some of them we want to save in, but what are we seeing and what's exciting for us? And I think maybe we'll start at this end this time and go down the other way.
Okay, so look, this is amazing that this panel talked for almost 45 minutes. We didn't mention AI, right? So give us credit. You give us credit, right? So AI is very interesting. I've always been kind of not a skeptic, but more of a pragmatist on AI. I like all the energy that I see, but just like electric vehicles in Lagos, Nigeria, which doesn't make any sense, right? First, the roads, we're trying to get the roads to work, and then there's barely any power, So, there's a picture of a Tesla with a generator on the top driving, right? So that's the kind of stories that you see. So AI for me kind of has some of that. I think that the trend is African governments, the public sector, and the private sector will come together and be like, okay, you know, we need to slow down because there's way too much AI coming at us right now. There's just too many people talking about this. We need to put some governance in place to allow startups who want to come and do AI from abroad and on the continent, or those who are partnering, or those who are local. I think the AI conversation is going to become a lot more nuanced, as opposed to kind of this rush. It was almost like crypto three years ago on the continent. I'm not talking about the rest of the world. On the continent, it was crazy. And the same thing is starting to happen again. And I think that what I'm seeing is there's a lucid, I think Justina on the panel before, I think the second panel, she said that, you know, AI for creation, not AI for destruction. I think you're going to start to see governments get a little bit more lucid about that. I'm seeing that in Rwanda, I'm seeing that in Zambia. And so I think that's a trend that I would like to see continue.
I think that's a great point, and I think we're all operators on the panel, and so for us it's more about enabling us to do better work, not replacing and not, you know, trying to find a solution for everything.
For me, I'd say maybe fostering more these bridges that we are starting to create actually across the continent with the work that, for example, Smart Africa is doing, also AfriLabs when it comes to the hubs and other networks and entities. I think it's super important to create these spaces where people convene, discuss. I think this is where partnership starts, and maybe also our event today, like the Africa Business Forum, is a great opportunity also to foster and build and strengthen the bridge that Estonia is supporting actually with the African continent. So this is, I think, a lot can happen if we can keep creating these spaces to foster these partnerships and collaborations. But for Africa and from a funding perspective, actually, what I am personally excited about is seeing more funding going to AgTech startup and supporting the agriculture sector because of like food insecurity is a big challenge for the continent. And in the previous years, we didn't see a lot of funding going into AgTech solutions. And in the recently, we are seeing an increase of interest when it comes to supporting AgTech. And personally, I'm super excited about that because I think they are solving a real problem on the continent. And yeah.
If I just one other industry that I'm excited about is the creative industry on the continent. I can't believe I was on stage and I didn't speak about that because that's my
we have time.
So the creative industry on the continent is on fire. So if there are any, you know, if you're thinking about that, that's an environment that you want to be in on now, right? They are doing some really incredible things. In fact, the Paystack story that Caleb was talking about actually has a creative angle because there was a big movie that came out on Netflix called The Black Book, a Nigerian movie, won a whole bunch of awards, just a lot of accolades, and it was funded, right, by two Paystack co-founders, right, and other tech people. So that money that came from Stripe found its way into the creative industry, and we're starting to see some serious energy around that. So just like the ag tech, you know, environment, the creative and create tech environments are, please, man, if there's anybody doing that, come down. Let's make it happen because, you know, Africa is telling a story right now.
Let me build on that. I think creative industry in general is really exciting. Like we're seeing it in film and Nollywood, but we're also seeing it in music. Like if you look at our top 100 songs, like there's probably Burna Boy in there. There's probably like Rima in there. Like a lot of these Afrobeat artists that are now global, like they're global superstars and they're selling out stadiums. So that's really exciting.
And none of them are Ghanaian. They're all Nigerian.
All Nigerian, right?
No, Tyler. Tyler's from South Africa.
Okay,
Tyler. You guys surely know Tyler. I think one industry that is a little bit more techy that is also creative, that's very exciting, is gaming. Across the continent, like we have extremely high phone penetration. So we have like, obviously, you know, a lot of folks here would have Samsung, Galaxy, smart like iPhones. But we have kind of like low-end smartphones as well, which are very accessible, very cheap. You could like pay $50 and you have a lot of the functionality that you'd normally have on a Samsung. Now, like, because so many young people are growing up on the internet, cheap internet and accessible phones, there's kind of like this gaming market, it's almost like hyperactive, right? Like there's a lot more opportunity to build games, local mobile games for the continent. And there's a lot of like really interesting things you can do there. There's a company called Carry First, which develops games, has a gaming studio, a lot of smaller studios popping up. So I think gaming is also another really big industry that's just set to really grow as well. Personally, I'm really interested in platforms. So I think that there's a handful of platforms that have a lot of people in emerging markets, and WhatsApp is like a fantastic platform. So everyone communicates on WhatsApp. Actually, like, I kind of run my life on WhatsApp. Like, you organize, you're like the person who come clean your place on WhatsApp. Like, you organize things on WhatsApp. You can sell on WhatsApp. Businesses operate there. So, like, what startups are building for WhatsApp to build tooling, build services that exist there that allow for like e-commerce, or allow for knowledge transfer, or allow for education. There's a few very exciting startups in that space. I think that startups that build on WhatsApp have a really significant play. And then one broad one is that I think that our startup, there was this massive funding boom in 21, 22. That was just global like VC, and so Africa took a small percentage of that, 1 or 2% of the global funding. So it's kind of tiny, and that has had a like really that's seen a lot of new founders come into the game a couple of years ago. I think what we're seeing now is we're having this really big slowdown on VC funding, and that's probably a good thing, because we're seeing that like a lot of the founders who now go to build something, they're serious, they're focused, they see a real opportunity, and that they're not going in being like, here's my deck, can I have some money and get started? They're building by bootstrapping first. I think that's very healthy for our ecosystem. And it means we're going to see some like very real solutions, rather than a lot of startups that ultimately failed because they started because people wanted to be founders rather than solve a problem. So I'm really excited for the next 3 to 5 years. It's not going to be our glory years like the last 2 in terms of funding, but I think it's a very positive thing for the startup ecosystem on the continent.
Excellent. Carolyn?
All right. So I'll talk about use cases, and just if I think about the future, and to what I think one of our secretaries to the cabinet was saying, you have as many use cases as there are hours in a day. So in the tech space, the companies that I see that will make it are the ones that tap into those use cases and create products for the different consumer customer profiles, but also localize them, and I keep going to localization, such that whatever works in Ghana may not necessarily really work in Nigeria. How do you leverage on the use case that is very particular to that specific country? Yeah, we break away from that Africa is one big country. Tap into the use cases and localize those solutions. Now, the use cases that are relevant today may not necessarily be the ones that will be relevant a few years down the line. So how do we evolve in a much faster way? And when I think about regulation, in some of the cases, we will have to work with our regulators to define what does the legislation look like, because it will be uncharted waters that they've never experienced. It's things that possibly we also haven't experienced. So instead of regulation acting as an inhibitor, it's a partnership between the private sector and the regulators to define what is the policy that enables that sector and the sector that we are talking about to thrive. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Folks, I think we've had a really informative and actually practical hour here with everybody on the stage. So if you could join me in giving them a big round of applause. Thank you to all of our speakers. I think Joel's going to come back and tell you about the breakout rooms. I hope that we will see you all in them.
Thank you very much. We'll give you some token. Then we can take a group photo. Then I'll give the instructions to the next sessions. Go ahead. Just give.
Does it have the security thing that you give?
Yeah. This has the security thing.
Okay, just making sure.
Especially for Caleb. Caleb, there's something there that you need to be using every day for your chat. Please. You're about to be hacked, so that's something there for you, special from Daniel for you. Have you done a group photo? Go ahead. Thank you very much. So, thank you. I think my LinkedIn post next week, someone said there are as many use cases as there are hours in a day. Did everyone take that one? Please post tomorrow morning. So there are words here that are floating quite heavily. So thank you. I think the next session is a breakout. So remember, in the morning, I did a small exercise, which was put your hand up. Now, this is where the hand up conversation comes in. In the breakout sessions, you'll be able to ask questions, you'll be able to interact a bit closer to the panelists, and just have that one-on-one kind of conversation. So listen to the next instructions very, very carefully. Every one of you has a badge, right? If you don't have a badge, then you're not supposed to be here, by the way. Yeah? If you have a badge, if you check your badge, you have a color code, right? So either yellow, mine was digital societies. There's a blue, I think is, what was it? Blue was up. Yep, so you have digital societies, you have green tech, you have startups, and you have edtech. So there are 4 different rooms, which I'll ask you to identify as you go out. So when you walk out, so digital societies, if you're registered for it, you stay in this room. So it's digital societies. The staircase, as you came up, there's a room on the left. It's called Brussels. I think that's where we're going to have green tech. If you turn to your right, where there's a DJ, next there's a room called Berlin, which is going to be the EdTech room. And then in the corridor, there is startups. So if you've chosen any of those are the 4 rooms. There are guys who have been black with sort of like crew who can also direct you there. So this is the plan. We walk out, grab a coffee, 10 minutes, then we go into the rooms, okay? So you go into your room, listen to the conversation, and then, why do people leave when I say some stuff? Can we close the doors, please? So, this is the deal that I want to make with you, because we've had this deal with Daniel. So we've discussed with Daniel one thing. If you guys want to have a nice social networking session, then we have to finish punctually by 4:30. So by 4:30, we'll have set up the cocktail outside here. So 1 hour, 1.5 or 1:15 minutes for your breakouts. Then we will meet and close outside here. So have a coffee, and then let's go into the rooms, and we'll be back here at about 4:30. Thank you very much.